This is TradeFlow News, bringing you relevant news and insights from around the world. TradeFlow News, enabling trade for SMEs and economies worldwide.
These are some of the key topics that we will be looking into in today's program.
First, let's take a look at the overnight headlines which are impacting the commodity markets.
Oil prices climbed more than 1% on Wednesday, as investors weighed a fresh round of U.S. sanctions on Iran, a drop in U.S. crude stocks and a softer tone from President Donald Trump towards the Federal Reserve and his tariff war with China. Brent crude futures hit their highest since April 4 earlier in the session at $68.65 a barrel and were up $1.10, or 1.63%, at $68.54 a barrel at 0842 GMT. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude rose $1.12, or 1.76%, to $64.79. Sending bullish signals on the supply side, the U.S. issued new sanctions targeting an Iranian shipping magnate whose network ships hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Iranian liquid petroleum gas and crude oil, the U.S. Treasury said.
The European Commission is assessing whether it could legislate to forbid firms in the European Union from signing new contracts for Russian fossil fuels, a senior EU official said on Tuesday. It is also working on legal options to allow EU companies to break existing gas supply contracts with Russia without facing penalties, the senior official added. With some member states vowing to block any EU sanctions on Russian gas, the Commission is instead looking at other tools that could hasten the end of Europe's reliance on Russian energy. It plans to set out options for doing this in a roadmap due on May 6.
Moving on to the top news in the energy sector.
New U.S. sanctions against Iran's energy sector point to Washington's lack of goodwill and seriousness over dialogue with Tehran, Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson said on Wednesday ahead of Iran-US nuclear talks this weekend. On Tuesday, Washington targeted an Iranian liquefied petroleum gas magnate with sanctions, which fall within the scope of President Donald Trump's maximum pressure campaign and its objective to drive Iranian oil exports to zero. The continued imposition of sanctions against various economic sectors of Iran is in clear contradiction with the U.S. claim for dialogue and negotiation and indicates the lack of goodwill and seriousness of the U.S. in this regard, Esmail Baghaei said in a statement shared on Telegram.
Saudi Arabia and India agreed to boost cooperation in supplies of crude and liquefied petroleum gas, according to a joint statement reported by the Saudi state news agency on Wednesday following a visit by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Saudi Arabia is one of the top exporters of petroleum to India. Modi met Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman before cutting short his visit and returning to New Delhi after an attack on India's Jammu and Kashmir territory which killed 26 people, the worst attack in India since the 2008 Mumbai shootings. The two countries also agreed to deepen their defense ties and improve their cooperation in defense manufacturing, along with agreements in agriculture and food security. Next, we have the top news in metal markets. Dalian iron ore futures hit their highest levels in nearly 3 weeks on Tuesday, underpinned by hopes of U.S.-China trade talks and strengthening seasonal demand for the steelmaking ingredient. The most traded September iron ore contract on China's Dalian Commodity Exchange climbed 2.11% to finish at 727 yuan and 50 fen, $99.73, a metric ton. Earlier in the session, prices hit 731 yuan, their highest since April 3. The benchmark May iron ore on the Singapore Exchange was 1.61% higher at $100.20 a ton, as of 0708 GMT.
Gold prices dipped on Wednesday after U.S. President Donald Trump hinted at lower tariffs for China and backed away from threats to fire Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. Spot gold was down 1.6% at $3,328.48 an ounce as of 0949 GMT, after hitting a record high of $3,500.05 in the previous session. U.S. gold futures dropped 2.3% to $3,340.60. The comments of President Trump, including his softer stance towards the Fed chairman as well as his comments on China, eased some market concerns and weighed on the yellow metal, said UBS analyst Giovanni Stornovo.
We will now look at the top news in the agricultural sector.
Thai farmer Dang Donsinger was already worried for her family of 9 when rice prices in the world's second largest exporter of the staple crashed this year after India resumed exports. Now, she's also fretting over the tariffs unleashed by US President Donald Trump, which could slash demand for Thai rice in its most valuable foreign market and create turmoil in an export industry worth billions of dollars. The problem is that the price of rice is very low, while other costs such as fertilizers and farmland rent is higher, the 70-year-old farmer said, after selling her harvest at a rice mill in central Thailand. "I'm losing money."
That is all for today's news on commodity markets. Stay tuned to TradeFlow News as we continue to provide you with more updates. We also invite you to follow us on Twitter at TradeFlow News, which allows you to watch our program on your mobile device or desktop to receive information from there.